it's a new chapter in Blackballed this week in the sense that we are interviewing people that I like to say are sort of nibbling the edges of the cult. They're not exactly they're not members, but they have had dealings with the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. We had on Emily Victoria the other day. She dated a cult member. We also had on Mike Moore yesterday, actually, and Mike Moore is a person who was part of the Plymouth Brethren, but not the sect that we deal with, the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. It was a more lighter version, but there is still cult-like activities that happen in that as well. And we're just trying to sort of get a more full picture idea of what this organization is like through the lens of people that have had dealings with him. So would you please welcome to the show today? She used to work for a Plymouth Brethren Christian Church owned company, part of the UBT syndicate network. I don't know what they would call it. And her name is Floss. Floss, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing okay. When we talked, I saw a bit of your appearance on the Get a Life podcast. For those who don't know, the Get a Life podcast is a podcast that's hosted by ex-members of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, including, I think I've interviewed all of them here on Blackballed. But it was really interesting because there is a network of companies owned by the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, known as the UBT. What does the UBT stand for? I don't even know what it's. Do you know what it stands for? Universal
Yes.
something.
Yeah, Universal Business Team. So it's basically it's like the cult head office. That's where everything goes through there.
Okay, and you're in Australia.
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, how did you get this job? Where was it? And what was the interview process like?
Surprisingly, it was really normal. So I just applied for a job through a recruitment agency. They gave me a call and said, we've got this role. Are you interested? And I said, yeah, sure. I'll go for an interview. And she said was, are you happy working for an organization that are predominantly conservative Christian? And I said, oh, that's fine, but I'm not religious. Does that matter? And she said, no, not at all. That they're not, they're not looking to, recruit anyone for the Lord. It's more just a role. And so I thought, great. And then I went for one interview with who would turn out to be my future boss, and he was kind of mentioning that it was that they were all predominantly conservative Christian, and then he said, "Oh, but we are not a cult." And I just remember thinking, "Okay, so you are. That's cool. Let's do this."
And what kind of company was it?
So they look after all of the schooling. So the Plymouth Brethren have got their own schools. So that it was basically like the school head office was there. They also did. So with the Brethren, obviously you can't have, social media. You're blocked off from most of the internet. So they change all their phones, their laptops, their cars. So they take the radios out of the cars and make sure that you can't access anything that you shouldn't, even in their vehicles. So they did all of that. They looked after finances. They look after all of the events that they had. So whether they were just business events, like networking events, or, how to pilfer money from the non-brethren people, basically.
Right. And so being a person that is, first of all, in the interview, when they were like, we're not a cult, and how do you feel about working for conservative Christians? I don't know if I would be able to hide from my face my absolute contempt of you know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
because it feels like I mean, I don't know what the labor laws are like in Australia. In Canada, that might be a gray area, but it feels like there would be an argument for like, why would you even bring up religion during a job interview? Did it make you
Yeah.
feel uncomfortable or just awkward, or were you just like, this is kind of weird, or how did you feel about that?
Yeah, I felt really strange. Only because I was like, I don't really care if you're religious. I don't like, oh, are we just doing a job here? Is it like, you don't need to tell me about that. But then on the flip side, we have a lot of companies in Australia that are, run by, like the churches and stuff like that. And there are some companies where they prefer you to be of that religion, and my understanding around that is purely because they are, you're kind of working within a Catholic school or like a Catholic group where they would want, for you to be able to relate to other people within that kind of religious community. But it's kind of usually put in the job ad, this is we've got this Catholic school and we prefer you to be of the Catholic religion. So you kind of just go, okay, well, that's definitely not me. So you kind of move along. But I think I was more weirded out by the fact that he said, well, this is not a cult. I'm like, if you have to tell me that, then there's...
Hi, my name is James, and I don't beat my wife. I just like to let everyone know that. Like, it just seems like that guy probably beats his wife, right? Like, do you have, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but it just popped in my head. Are you a religious person?
No. So I used to be when I was younger, in my, search to figure out who I was. I used to be Christian, and I was really into it, got baptized. And then the day that I got baptized, I never went back to church after that. I was like, you know what? No, it's not really me. It's not. There are some things
water
that
went
people
up. Is it because water went up your nose? Is that?
No, I think it was because I just thought, like, none of this is really making sense. And when I've got questions, like, there's a lot of contradictions in the Bible, which I've read, and no one would give me answers on the contradictions. So I just thought, okay, well, if you can't answer this, I'm out, because I'm just going to be pissed off the whole time because I don't understand what the truth is here. So it was, no disrespect to anyone who's religious. And if you have your faith, that's fantastic. It's just not for me.
No, and I totally understand that. It's a weird, and it's a classic story too. The whole asking questions about your holy book, but no matter what the religion is, and whether or not there are contradictions and things like that. When I remember the first time that I heard someone referencing the Bible by saying that it's open to interpretation, I was just like, really? Like, doesn't that create a lot of problems?
Yeah.
Like, I almost have more respect for, in fact, yesterday, Mike Moore, the guest that I had, he mentioned Christopher Hitchens. Christopher Hitchens was a public intellectual and a journalist who was also a really staunch atheist, very outspoken, very articulate. But he once said that I don't remember the person that he debated, but it was a pastor. And he was like, I have more respect for the pastor that takes the word of the Bible literally than I do of the religious leader that bends the context and definitions and meanings of certain parables and sections of the Bible, because at least you can respect the guy that owns it, right? Like,
yes.
But the guy that kind of bends and twists seems more like a grifter, like it's a little, there's a big difference. So what job were you hired for? What was your position?
So I was a business development coordinator. So my role was to support my manager and our business unit with. So we had a lot of brethren companies worldwide. So they would actually travel to us, and we were partnering with another company that looked at finances in a business, and we would bring them in and have these 3-day workshops to learn where their business stood financially and how to make it grow. So that was one half of what I was doing, and then the other half was all of the events, planning all of the events.
The events for a school, for.
No, they were business events. There was one event that the Brethren have yearly. I mean, I don't know what it would be like now, especially with COVID, but they did have one event yearly where they would all come together, all in a big stadium, and Lord only knows what happened in there, because of course we weren't allowed to be in there. We weren't even allowed to be in the business ones. Like, we're banned from those things. I believe because it's part business, stuff, and then church meeting or whatever they
That
discuss in
was
there.
that was one of the cool takeaways of our initial brief conversation that we had a couple days ago, which was that you're basically tasked with organizing an event that you're not allowed to go to.
Yes.
Like that is batshit. But you had a really good you had a really good response, because I think I asked you, like, why wouldn't they hire someone inside the cult in order to do that job? And your answer was obvious. I mean, it seemed obvious to me once you said it. I was like, oh yeah, I guess so. They don't have the skill set to be able to do that because of how sheltered they are.
Yeah. Yeah, so they don't. That's why they started hiring people from outside of their community, and there were some people that were okay with it, and there were definitely some, predominantly the men, were really pissed off about it, because they don't want worldly people coming in, and especially worldly women. Like, I mean, women are already within the community, like, women are pretty low, but then of course when you bring in a worldly woman, it kind of goes downhill from there, and they're visibly offended just by looking at you. Like, it's so
Do you think that and I'll try to word this in the right way, because I'm not trying to be a funny person, but do you think that is there like a vein inside Plymouth Brethren men that find worldly women to be kind of like temptation? Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
they don't want the Eve with the apple hanging around kind of thing, or Mary Magdalene or whatever the fuck they want to make it seem
I
like.
don't know. I mean, look, I was at work called a whore multiple times, as if it was like a normal thing to say to someone.
What?
And they were explaining to me that, worldly women are whores because they don't follow the words. They're not pure. And I was kind of standing there looking at them thinking, like, fuck, you can't say that to me. Like, that's not an okay thing to say. Well, we're in a work setting, for one. And two, if we were at a bar, I would have punched you in the face.
Yeah.
But to them, it was just, that's just who you are. And that's how we see you. And you just have to be okay with it. Like, so I think that,
Go ahead.
when they're looking at like worldly women, I mean, they're looking at us as if we're whores. And one, nothing wrong if you are, but two, like,
I kind of like whores. I don't understand Just kidding.
It's really strange. And I don't know, they always made comments about the fact that the only, brethren women are beautiful. And so I don't know exactly if we were seen as a temptation, or if we were just seen as basically the devil with a dress walking in.
Can you give me an idea of what a day in the life was like for you? Like, do you like give me some stories? I know you talked about some of the stuff on the Get a Life podcast. I skimmed through it. As I told you, I'm pretty open about this stuff. When someone appears on the Get a Life podcast, I never watch it from beginning to end, and that's not to knock the Get a Life podcast. It's a brilliant podcast, but I like to sort of do things a little bit more conversationally. So I don't have any real tidbits to pick off that tree to ask you about. So as if I've never heard of you or anything that you've been through, give me an idea of a day in the life of someone, a worldly woman working in for a cult company.
Sure. So we were, despite the fact that we were not part of the religion, we had to dress a certain way. So it was always skirts, or a dress had to be, below the knee. We had to wear stockings, high necks, and I had to have long sleeves. So I've got tattoos on my arms.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to be, hidden away, really like dull colors, next to no makeup. Like, you really just had to be super plain. So I would dress up the total opposite to who I was on a day-to-day basis. And then I'd go and casually have a panic attack in my car before walking into the office. And once we were in there, you typically didn't, some people would say good morning, most people wouldn't. I would usually sit so we had like a hot desking situation, so you could sit anywhere, but we usually chose, well, me and some of the other worldly people would all kind of sit together to work. And then it was just, going through emails, making sure that when we're sending emails, we're speaking appropriately. So no, hi, hey, how's it going? It was hello, and, really formal. So yeah, so we just kind of put our heads down, do our jobs, and then we would go. They had a like a kitchen and a dining room. So at lunchtime, we would all go upstairs and sit in our separate areas because we can't share food together. And then we'd go back downstairs and finish the afternoon and then get the hell out of there, ready to do it again the next day.
And so, but was there any harassment on the part of any of these people? Like, did you get sexually harassed, or did you get like, you know, abused verbally? Like, I mean, people called you whores. I mean, so obviously there was some sort of abuse that
Yes,
was
so there
happening
was
there.
there was definitely verbal abuse, and like snide little comments. Like I remember, because I had a lot of questions, so I would be, I'd be asking, the Brethren people, I mean, who I had formed somewhat of a professional relationship with. I would be asking them questions about, what they were allowed to do, what they weren't allowed to do, and kind of trying to get an understanding of what their worlds were like, and what their kind of beliefs were. And I mean, I was told, like, I remember one day, like my boss saying to me, "Oh, so when the rapture comes, we're all going to go to heaven, and you're going to burn in hell." And I was like, "Oh shit, okay." And he just said,
That's the,
like you're all going to, and we're glad about it. That's what should be happening. And I was just standing there going, "Oh Jesus, okay." Like that's like they're hardcore things to say, but they don't see them as a hardcore thing to say. Like, I don't just go and tell someone that they're going to burn in hell and I'm going to be stoked about it. Like, that's not how you speak to people. But they were big on making comments about our lives and how shit they were, basically. Like, I was living with my partner out of wedlock, like instantly a whore. I had tattoos, and they're horrific. You can't have anything on your skin, which I didn't know that they took as seriously as they did, because when we we ended up moving into the new office, and they had a lot of large, like, canvas photos and images. And in one of them, there was, it was just like essentially people sitting, I think it was on a street in Melbourne, and there's all the cafes. And there was a woman who was sitting in the picture with her, you could see her back, but she had tattoos down her arms, and someone had taken the effort to just get a Sharpie and literally just scribble it out. So she just had like a big black block on her arm. And I remember that some people had picked up on it, and they all knew that I had tattoos, and they're like, "You've got to go down and look at this picture." And I remember cracking up thinking, you are so offended by something that isn't going to hurt you, that you're having to like scratch it off and scribble it off like an image. It's wild.
my Tinder profile like says that my preferences are tattooed chicks that are living with a partner out of wedlock. So I mean, there's still hope. There's still hope. Um, so I heard through the grapevine that you also had a couple meetings with this man, the esteemed
Yeah, that
leader
man.
of the Plymouth Brethren crazy cult, Bruce Hales. What
Yeah.
context did you ever have to meet that man, and what was that like?
Well, he was one of the lovely gentlemen that called me a whore. And so he actually came. I only met him a couple of times. Once in our office when we had just moved, and of course they wanted to show him his empire in business form.
Sorry,
So
the way
he
you said
kind
that,
of
I thought you were going to say something else, like he wanted to show me his big empire. I was like, okay,
he's
yeah.
just tiny, sad little empire. And And then I met him at an event, which is when I was standing with him, and it was honestly surprising that he was standing with me, but I was putting up the stands for all of they had a whole heap of pamphlets and stuff, and I was kind of putting it all together, and just making sure that it looked okay. And he was speaking to my manager at the time, and they just kind of came to have a look. So we ended up in a conversation, and he was not a pleasant man. I mean, all you have to do is Google him, and you can see that there's not a lot of good things going his way. But to also be in the presence of someone who is so, widely respected by the Brethren people. I mean, that's their God essentially. Like, he is just speaking, God's word directly from God. And I just thought, like, you're a creep. Like, he gave me creepy vibes.
What was the sentence that he said to you? Like when he called you that name? Like what was happening at that point?
All of the Brethren women were starting to arrive, and that my boss and him were having a conversation about how beautiful and pure Brethren women were. And I just didn't understand the context of being a pure woman. So I was just asking the question, and he had explained, well, because they follow, the Lord's words so beautifully and eloquently. They're so beautiful and pure, unlike worldly women like yourselves who are whores. And I was like, sick, cool.
Was that your, honestly, what was your reaction? I'm laughing because, sorry to cut you off, but I'm laughing because you strike me as a person who is able to take situations like that and sort of like react more like a spectator, where you smile rather than get all offended. But even though it's really offensive,
yeah, no.
even though it's super offensive.
Yeah, no, I most of the time, I reckon I probably just had this dumbfounded look on my face for the entire year and a half that I was working there. And then I would just kind of get in the car and just go, what the fuck was that? Like, what is happening here? And then I would just be like, things are said to you, and they're said so freely and so openly that can either be really offensive, really damaging. And because it's kind of so not normal, when it's said to me, I was just like, huh?
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. And then I'd just kind of be like, all right, and then just walk away and just go, like, what on earth was that?
Okay. I'll be your whore. Like, I don't know. Like, it would make me. I don't know. I'm not a woman. I don't know what I would do in that situation. But there's a part of me that feels like I would try to blow the really like tame looking guy down the hallway, because just to pollute that organization as much as I possibly could, right? Like,
yeah.
Don't take my advice. Trust me, I'm sure you handled it a lot far better than I would have. Okay, so you were with the company for a year and a half.
Yeah.
So, first of all, how did you last that long?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out, to be honest. It didn't all happen. It didn't all happen at once. It certainly wasn't you walk in the door and your life is ruined. It was, everyone was kind. And because we, us worldly people were only just starting to work with them, everyone was really quiet. Everyone was kind of not sure what to do. I mean, like, for us, it was kind of strange because we were kind of finding out about these people, whereas for them it was strange because they were having to be with worldly people all day, every day in a work setting. And so it kind of took a while for things to kind of get to the point where there was more comfort in being themselves, essentially. But, I like, they paid well. So I was like, well, I've got rent to pay. I've got a family to feed. So I'm just going to, every workplace has its downsides. But, when the downsides started to really not only outweigh the good side, but to affect me, physically and mentally. Like, I started getting really sick. I was really anxious. That was when I was like, I've got to get out of here. I've got to do something else. And I was really stoked to finally give them my resignation and leave, because I thought, I'm destroying myself being here. And it's sad because these people have no idea how damaging they are to other people, but also how damaging they are to themselves.
So you have kids?
I'm a stepmom.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. And was there ever any company events where worldly and cult members were able to intermingle, if not eat, obviously together, but like, were there any corporate events where you could bring your families, or was that just nothing that you would ever do?
Oh no.
No.
No, they don't want to know your families. They're never going to do that.
That was like the worst question I've ever asked on Blackballed. As soon as it came out of my mouth, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? You've been fucking studying this goddamn organization for a year and a half. You should know by now that they don't give a shit about that. Tell me about when the cops showed up at your office.
Oh yeah. So to give you an idea, so the office is at Sydney Olympic Park, which is where we held the Olympics in 2000. And so there's kind of constantly stuff going on there. There's always, events, and there's a lot of businesses that are in there.
Is that right beside
So
the
it's
Opera House there?
no,
No?
the Opera House is in the city.
Oh, okay. I thought you said Sydney. Didn't know what you said?
Sydney Olympic Park.
Oh, okay.
So
My bad.
so it's probably about maybe 40 minutes
Okay.
from the Harbour Bridge and the Opera
Mhm.
House. And so it's kind of more west. So there's police kind of around all the time. You don't really question it. But we questioned it just a little bit when there was a bunch of them just in the lobby of the building, and me, one of the women that I was working with, we'd gone for a walk on our lunch break and just come back to just police everywhere. And we're just looking at each other thinking, oh, like, has there been an accident? Has there been a fire? Like, we certainly weren't thinking that it was going to be something to do with our workplace. And the police were there to investigate some of the elders on, child molestation crimes. And I had to pack up and leave. I couldn't handle something like that. I just thought these people are disgusting. And the fact that they're having to show up at the workplace. I thought one thing that was really good was about the police showing up was that there was somebody within the Brethren who was, brave enough to seek some help. But there's a big scramble in the office to make it seem like it was kind of nothing, and the worldly people are just out to get us. And when I thought about it more, I thought, God, you sit there and you're so offended by something like a tattoo, so much so that you'll make comments to someone who's got them, or you'll scratch them out of an image, but you seem to have no issues with, assaulting children and assaulting women and, assaulting anyone in there. That's okay. But God forbid if you get a little love heart tattoo on you, like, that's it. You go to hell, burn there forever.
Yeah, I've heard stories about like that, and the one that you just conveyed sounds, unfortunately familiar, where they almost like mobilize, like, oh, someone's coming after one of our brothers, time to mobilize,
Yeah.
and we'll put up a firewall, even if it's about pedophilia, because that's our brother, and we recognize the authority of how we interpret the Bible over the laws of Australia.
Yeah.
How long after that did you leave the job?
I don't think I was there. I think I had actually already put my resignation. So I put in gave a 4 week notice period. And I think I was probably only there for maybe a week or two afterwards. But I found it really hard then to go back into work and kind of finish out that period, because I was like, I kind of already had some idea that there was, a lot of, like, there was abuse going on. I mean, they're insanely racist, insanely homophobic, insanely misogynistic, and they're so open about it. And so, it's not a far stretch to say that they're, abusing people. And it certainly wasn't a far stretch to think that they were doing that to children as well. But when it became like a glaring reality, when police are showing up to, investigate these men that I work in an office with, I was just like, this is like just way too much. It's so overwhelming, because all I did was just, one, I was absolutely horrified and disgusted, but two, I just felt so sad that it's a thing that they just brush under the rug, because the men can just do what they want, and we just have to deal with it.
Do you know if any of those charges led to convictions? No.
No. So I did look it up. I did kind of keep an eye out, because I was really interested and really hopeful that somebody would face some kind of consequence, and nothing ever came up. And so whether they have been convicted or not, it's certainly been kept out of, the public's eye.
So what did that experience then? What did you leave with? Like, again, you strike me.
Trauma.
Well, I was going to say, I was actually going to say the opposite of that. I'm sure there were some traumatic experiences, but again, you seem to have a sort of disposition that is, that is beneficial to have in a job like that. Like, if you don't seem timid, like, you got sleeve tattoos, like, you're probably a little bit tough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But you leave a job like that. It had some trauma attached to it. It had men accused of abuse. You were called a whore. But at the end of the day, were you able to like extract any positive sort of experience, not from them, but from yourself as a reaction to them when you left?
Yeah, well, look, I think that I definitely, it kind of really solidified within myself that I've got, like a good moral compass, and that that I can be like, one, if I'm standing next to them, and this is not all of the people within the brethren, but there is a majority of them. If I'm standing next to them, at least I know that I'm a bloody good person, um, and that I'm not out here living my life every day destroying other people. And I kind of saw within myself, I was like, oh, you can have doubts about who you are as a person, especially if you're having a bit of a tiff with someone. But I kind of just know that I care about people really deeply. But it also took me a while to kind of get to that point, because I was trying to wade through all of the experiences that I'd been with and not knowing what to do with them, because it's not every day that someone walks out of a job and just goes, well, I just worked for this like psycho cult, and I don't know what, like, let me tell you my stories. And so I would tell my friends about it, and we would just have a drink on it, and I'd be like, well, this is what happened at work this week. And it was kind of like this funny story, like these funny stories, and they
It's like a
had to
TV
be
show.
funny, because it was otherwise it was traumatic.
Did you ever meet anybody that you worked with that was a member of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, but that you could tell was just a really genuinely nice person that wasn't judgmental? Like, were there people like that?
Yeah. It was actually, there was a couple of girls that I was working with, and they were only young. They would have been maybe 8 years younger than me, and they were really, really lovely. And I used to laugh, because we became quite close, and we shouldn't have been. Like, that's obviously not allowed, but they would take my phone if I was going into a meeting and scroll through my Instagram and my my Facebook and all my social media, and, listen to music that they weren't supposed to be listening to, because they knew that I was never going to tell anyone. I was never going to go to, their managers and just say, well, guess what they've been doing? I was encouraging it. I was thinking, look at the world that you're missing out on. Look at everything that you're, and I remember the first post that they actually saw was on my Instagram. I was following the hashtag Woman Crush Wednesday, because it comes up with a lot of heavily tattooed women. And I think the images are great. And this girl came up and she was like, very, very fake. Every implant, she had this like beautiful blue hair, and she thinks she was just lying down like on the sand, and she had like a wave kind of half crashing on her, and she was wearing like next to nothing. And that was the first photo they saw when they opened my Instagram, and they were both like staring at it, and you could see for a second they didn't know what to do with it, but then they were just like, and I was like, yes, keep looking.
You're indoctrinating them to the IG influencer world. Yeah. So funny. And what are you doing today?
So I work in recruitment now, in healthcare. So
well, that's
different. There's no cults.
No cults. That's refreshing. Well, listen, I always am fascinated at the world that exists outside of the world of the PBCC and the people, as I've been saying, that sort of nibble the edges of that. And it's amazing. How long ago was it? Like when did you quit that job?
I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago. I was actually trying to find. I did have my contract so that I would have the dates. I just can't. I just can't go back that far. I get too many emails, too many spam emails. But it was about 6 or 7 years ago. It's been a while.
Well, you seem like you're great today. And I'm really happy that you were able to share your story with us, because I as I said, I am bottomless when it comes to my interest in listening to people talk about what it's like to be in the vicinity of people in this group. And you're one of the stories out there that I find really compelling. So Floss, I really appreciate your time, and thank you for joining us tonight on Blackballed.
Oh, thank you so much.
You have a good evening. Yeah. Again, I think I said this the other day. I would have lasted maybe 10 minutes at that job. The fact that Floss hung in there for a year and a half is a testament to her not having the avalanche of flaws that I have. One of them being my inability to not have it written all over my face that I think you're a fucking psycho. You call me. And at the same time, I kind of, there's a part of me that wishes someone would call me a whore once in a while. But for real though, the endurance and the discipline that it would take is a testament to her. So Floss, again, thank you very much for joining us. Thursday, tomorrow on Blackballed, one of my favorite lyricists and hip hop artists of all time. His name, is Sage Francis. And he will be here tomorrow at 8 o'clock. I believe it's 8 o'clock. I should probably check. And guys, if you have not heard of Sage Francis, you need to go down a Sage Francis rabbit hole before the show tomorrow. It was the best of times. That's a great track. Makeshift Patriot is one of the ones that he's known for. Escape Artist is another one that he's known for. Do the deep dive. Listen to his B-sides. He used to also be in the battle scene and, battled some cats from way back in the day in like the late 90s and stuff. So I am super stoked to have him on the show, because we have, as a lot of white boys do, who embraced hip hop culture as youngsters. We have that sort of chronology of digging into the crates for the first time and then embracing it, becoming sort of like this little elitist, like, you don't know what real hip hop is, like that guy, and then having to grow out of that, and then reflecting on what you like about it, and then becoming a lyricist and all this stuff. I can identify with this guy on so many different levels. So I can't wait for that. And then Friday, the triumphant return of Casual Friday. And so it should be fun. I'm not sure if we're going to have Spenny this time. I hope we are. I haven't asked him yet. since since Ryan left Crier, it's been kind of weird because you know I didn't have to arrange guests in a sense because you know if you wanted to come on you came on, but now it seems like my guest is my co-host. But either way, Sage Francis tomorrow, Casual Friday on Friday. So we will see you next time on Blackballed.
Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed. Black.